asav adavay tzavafu veramshu lo chelku kadishu dimru kavod nafshu irin kadishu Nushu Malchayu, oh Yivat Gevir Tayir Vesimayu, Shvach Kuduma, Koile Yahvayu. Rabbi v'noivdai v'sakifi Rabbi v'noivdai v'sakifi Rabbi v'noivdai v'sakifi Muchich remayu v'sakif kififi Muchich remayu Muchich remayu Muchich remayu Zakif kefifi noy, zakif oy kefifi. We vey rabbi noy zakif zakifi, muchich remayu ve zakif kefifi, muchich remayu. Zakif kefifi, Rabbi v'noy v'dayik v'zakifi, Muchich remayu v'zakif kefifi, Muchich remayu v'zakif kefifi. Oy vey, oy vey, we vey Rabbi v'noy v'dayik v'sakifi Muchich remayu v'zakif kefifi Muchich remayu v'zakif kefifi Yoy gevir tayt b'chishbenayu Kari boyinu lam boyinu lam boyinu lam veyomayu Anti ma yasuna mi maribusu da 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 mahina oh la da 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 boy vi apai yasamai vi apai yasamai mi goy gulisu da 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 boy oh la 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 da 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 moy amahba ba yirdi bikhavat mikol imayu kari ba ba yinula mi ol imahba ba yu ahamti malku melech malchayu we vat gebit tayt vesimayu tanana yidana idom we vey oy oy hey na 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 idom oy 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 la 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 kudum achle havayu la mikdusha ikhti la mikdusha ikhti la mikdusha ikhti velikoy tshkichi ay 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 oy vey asahti vayechti asahti vayechti rikhin benavshi ay 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 ay
Shalom, my dear friends. Shalom from the holy city of Jerusalem. Today, the 20th day of the month of Sivan of the year 5777, corresponding to the 14th of June of the year 2017. Today, the 20th of Sivan, was traditionally observed in Europe as a day of memorial and a day of fasting and repentance on account of the terrible massacres that occurred in Europe from in the terrible years of 1648 and 1649, and likewise many other massacres in previous generations, because of the widespread education on the Holocaust across the Jewish world and other parts of the world, although this has been a manifest failure today when we consider how much hatred there is against us. But it's often forgotten that prior to the Holocaust, there were many other calamities that befell the Jewish people in our exile. And it is fitting that today we are here, with thanks to God, able to study the Torah in memory of those who lost their lives in those massacres. Before we do continue with our textual studies today, let me note that with thanks to God, we are really approaching the end of both the book of Iyov and the tractate of Shabbat of the Mishnah, which in my opinion is quite a feat. We're now, I believe, up into the 50s in the number of classes we've had on Iyov, and into the late 40s on the number of classes we've had on Shabbat. And these have been two very major projects, and I believe that within the next few sessions, we shall be completing both of these works. And my plan after that is to take a break for the summer period, and I will be notifying all those subscribed to the Kollel email list on azamra.org of exactly what will be the dates of the resumption of this program. I do personally feel a need to reconsider the scheduling and how much it's possible for me to teach weekly, and also to keep abreast of the other things that I have to keep up with. But I will notify you that my hope and my prayer is that in our Tanakh series that we will move on to the study of Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, which will be at the other extreme of the gamut of feelings and emotions from the book of Job, and a most fitting counterpoint, this work that Rabbi Akiva called the Holy of Holies. I'm carefully considering in what way to proceed with our studies in the Torah Shebe'al Peh, and a part of me is saying that we should not be neglecting works of inspiration and Chassidut, and my thoughts are turning in the direction of giving more priority to the study of Rabbi Nachman and his teachings, particularly in the Likutei Moharan. I'm also considering whether the study of the Mishnayot for many of our people is pitched at the right level, and that perhaps we should be looking at different aspects of the more practical aspects of the halakha. I very much welcome the feedback of participants in these classes. Please do feel free to email me using the contact facility at the azamra.org website and let me know what your feelings are about this. And now, indeed, today we are at the very climax of the book of Job, continuing with these most remarkable chapters, the end of chapter 38 and beginning of 39. So without further ado, let us now come into our studies of Sefer Iyov in the Hebrew text. Shalom, today, the 20th day of the month of Sivan of the year 5777, corresponding to the 14th of June of the year 2017. And we continue now in our study of the book of Job at the end of chapter 38, beginning with verse 39 of chapter 38. And as I mentioned in the previous session, it is somewhat surprising that, considering the original Hebrew text is a continuous parasha, all the way from the beginning of chapter 38 down to the end of chapter 39, and it's only there was one break in chapter 39 coming after verse 18. Verse 19 starts a new parasha, which goes on until the end of chapter 39, but there's no break in the Hebrew text between the end of the printed Bibles, chapter 38, and the beginning of 39. And in fact, if there's any break in the sense, it would come at the end of verse 38, which concludes God's challenges to Job about the creation of the great natural elements, the heavens and the earth, and we've seen the very great works of the fundamental forces of nature. It is now from 39 onwards until the end of chapter 39, from verse 39 in chapter 38 until the end of chapter 39, that we turn from the wonder of the elemental forces of nature to the diverse kinds of animals and birds found in nature. And we shall see in the coming verses that our section refers to quite a number of different species of animals and birds. We have the lion, and we have the raven. We have the mountain goat, and we have the deer. We have the donkey, two species of donkeys. We have the wild ox, We have the peacock, we have the stork, and finally, at the end of chapter 39, we come to quite a lengthy depiction of the horse. And then in chapters 40 and 41, we come to two creatures of seemingly a quite different nature, these being the Leviathan, this mighty sea creature, and the Behemoth, a mighty creature of the hills, both of them unable to be conquered by man. And in the introduction to the Sefer Yetzirah by Rabbi Avraham ben David of Posker, the Raavad that I've referred to in previous sessions, from his words on this section of the address by God to Job, we actually will see manifestations of the different creatures that appear in the divine chariot, the chariot of God's providence, as depicted in the book of Ezekiel, in the first chapter of Ezekiel, where we see that the Hayot had 4 heads. They had the head of the lion, they had the head of the ox, they had the head of the eagle, and the head of Adam, man. And we can see in the various species that are mentioned in these coming verses representatives of the 3 creatures among those heads, the lion, the ox, and the eagle, all of which are considered to be archetypes of all of the different wild beasts, animals, and birds. The lion is the king of the chayot, the wild beasts. The ox is the king and most powerful of the behemoth, some of which are domesticated. And the eagle is emblematic of all of the different kinds of birds, even though the individual birds, as it comes forth from the commentary of Raavad on the in his introduction to Sefer Yetzirah, which, as I've said, is entirely built up on these chapters of Job, it comes out that the different species do refer to different levels of the Merkava, both on the side of Kedusha, the side of holiness, and also on the side of what the Raavad refers to as the Temurot. The Temurot, the exchanges. The concept of Temurot, which appears somewhat less in the Kabbalah of Arizal, where the same aspect is referred to as the Klipot, the Raavad refers to these forces of unholiness as the Temurot in the world of exchanges, where the holy may have its place taken by the unholy. And following through our text, in the light of Raavad's comments, we will be able to, with God's help, discern some of these allusions in the verses in our Hebrew text. So let's turn now to the Hebrew text of Job at the end of chapter 38, beginning now with verse 39. Hasotsud lelovi toref, v'chayas kefirim temale. Hasotsud, interrogative, can you trap lelovi, to the lavi, lion, toref, his prey, v'chayas kefirim, the chaya, the living vitality of the kefirim, of the young cubs, to maleh, can you fulfill? Verse 40, ki yoshochu v'ma'onoth yeshvu basuko lemo orev. Ki yoshochu, when they prostrate, they stoop down, v'ma'onoth, in the dwellings, the lairs. Yeshvu v'suko, they will sit in the sukkah, the covered over place. Lemo orev, Lemor here is a biblical literary extension of the letter Lamed for Orev, for lying in wait, for the ambush. The animal, when it's ready to, waiting to get to its prey, it crouches down, ready to make a great leap. Verse 41, Mi yochin lo oiriv tsedo, ki yelodov el il yishava'o, yisa'o, leveli ochel. Mi yochin lo oiriv, who can prepare for the orev raven, tsedo, his prey. Just as we had the word at the beginning of verse 39, hatotsud, the verb of trapping prey, so here the tsedoi is the prey that is trapped. Who prepares the prey for the raven? Kielodov el il yishava'o. For the children of the raven, the chicks of the raven, to God they have to cry. Yisa'o liveli ochil. They will go astray without food. The lion with which we began is considered to be the emblem of chesed, the attribute of loving kindness. The black raven is at the very opposite end of, considered to be the archetype of cruelty. The raven is considered to be an exceptionally a cruel bird that does not even feed its own children. As our commentators tell us here in the commentaries, the raven, the black raven's chicks are actually white when they're first born. And when the raven looks at the chicks, it doesn't believe that they're its own offspring, and so it completely abandons them to their own fate. And that is why the ravens have to cry out to God for their sustenance. And the point that the Almighty is making here to Job is that whether it is in the case of the lions, you've never thought about providing them with their sustenance or their children. And when it comes to the raven, you've never thought about providing the raven's chicks, and nevertheless they all get fed. So again and again, the point is how God's providence extends to every detail of the creation. Well, now, Ravad, in his introduction to Sefer Yetzirah, looking at these verses, points out how they're all about the food, the sustenance of these creatures, and he goes into allusions to the way that there's a great cycle of the food chain, whereby the lowest in the chain are actually rising up to the higher levels when some maggot, as he specifies, is ingested by a pure species of bird, and either that bird lays an egg or that bird itself is slaughtered for consumption by a human being, and thus the maggot now turns into the human being. And so it is with all of creation. And yet, if a creature is ingested by a lower level of creature, then this is a degradation to the soul of that creature that's become the prey of a lower level creature. And so behind these words and these verses, Ra'avad discerns the teachings about the reincarnation of the souls at different levels through the way that soul ingests soul in the great food chain. So now, turning from chapter 38 to chapter 39, we come to a different facet of God's providence over the creatures of the earth unknown to us as we scuttle around our contemporary urban metropolises, not paying any attention whatever to the entire wild world around us. This very beautiful verse, Aleph, the first verse of chapter 39. Hayodato is ledes ya'ale sela, holel ayolos tishmor. Hayodato, again, the interrogative. Is it the case that you have known Eis, Ledes, the time of the giving birth of Ya'ale Sola? The Ya'el is the female mountain goat, the ibex. Cholel ayolos. Cholel is an expression that refers to the birth pangs of the deer, the ayalot. Again, the object of the verb tishmor. Do you guard the time of the birth pangs of the ayalot, of these deer? Tispor yirochim temal'eno. V'yodato is lidetono. Can you count the months to maleno that they complete, those goats and wild goats and deer, the number of months that elapse from their conception to the time of birth? Yodato is lidetono. If you do count the months, you'll be able to know the time of their birth. Ra'avad refers us to several sources in the rabbinical writings about the time spans of pregnancy of humans and certain species of animals, and relates it to the gematriot, the numerical values of the word herayon, of pregnancy, which alludes to the number of days of a normal pregnancy. And he points out that if it is possible to calculate the likely day of birth from if the woman knows the day of conception, but here no human is likely to be able to count the days of the conception of the deer and know the time of their birth. Verse 3, Tichrano Yaldihen tafalachnu, Hevleihem teshalachnu. These three verbs in this verse are referring to the ayalot. Tichrano, they bend down, they stoop down in the birth position, bending their karaim, their knees. Yaldihen tefalachno, the mothers tefalachno, the expression of falach is used of like driving through a spear or a knife. So we find it in early Proverbs to drive in and to make a breach. And here the word is referring to the way that they expel from their wombs, yaldehen, their children, yaldehen tefalachno, they expel the children, chevleihem teshalachno. The chevel is a rope, and also the chevlei leda would be the pangs of birth. And teshalachno, they are sending them forth to release themselves from the pangs of birth. Yahlamu v'nehem yirbu vabor yotz'u v'lo shavu lomo. Yahlamu v'nehem, their children will become healthy. Yirbu vabor, they will multiply out there in the wild. Yotz'u v'lo shavu lamo, they go out and they have not returned. They don't come back. They are independent without any human being doing anything to keep this, to regulate this. This is all under the direct providence of God. Well, there are many beautiful commentaries and midrashim on these verses. The ayala in particular, the deer, is emblematic of the sfira of malchut, the shechina. And the mystery of the Ayala recurs many times in the Holy Zohar. The secret of the Ayala, as we have it also in Psalms 22. Well, now, Rashi himself brings the Midrash about the birth of the Ayala. Rashi puts it like this, going first to verse 1 of chapter 39. Hayodato es ledet ya'alei sola. Do you know the time of the giving birth of the mountain goats, of the literally the ya'alei sola, the goats of the Sela, the rock? Rashi here says he brings the medieval French-German Steinbock. The Steinbock would be the Yael, the mountain goat. And she hates her child, and she goes to the top of the very high rock, and that is where she bends down to give birth, so that the child will fall down to the earth and die. But the Holy One, blessed be He, sends there an eagle that receives the bird in its wings. This is the Talmud says this in Bava Basra, Daf Tes Zayin Amud Aleph. Then the verse continues, verse 1, Cholel ayolois tishmor, the birth pangs of the ayalot, the deer, do you guard the time of this, the place of this? Rashi explains the word cholel as being related to the expression in Jeremiah chapter 6, verse 24, chil kayoleda, the pangs, the terrible pangs like that of a woman giving birth. And he says, Ha'ayala rach mutzar, the ayala, the deer, her rechem, her womb is narrow at its exit. Ve'navolod yochel letzes, the embryo cannot get out. And the time that she has to give birth, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I, the Holy One, prepare for her a darkon. The darkon would relate to our word dragon, a kind of, some kind of reptile. It gives her a bite at the exit of her womb. V'niftach, that is how it is opened up. V'maktim u'ma'acher rega miyad meso. If the drakon, this reptile, were to get there a moment before or a moment afterwards, she would die. Between those times, just before or afterwards, I certainly don't exchange the one for the other. I never change them around. I know exactly what is to be. How could you believe that I changed the name Iyov into Oyev, an enemy? The Gemara again in Bava Basra, Daf Tes Zayin Amud Bes, folio 16 on the B side of the page. So this mystery of the drakon, the serpent that comes to bite the womb of the ayala, is a very deep mystery relating how the aspect of malchut, of which it is said in Proverbs, ragleho yodas moves, her legs go down to death. There's a mystery whereby the apparently unholy force of the nachash, the serpent, the drakon, has a part in the parturition and the giving birth of the ayala, of the Shekhinah. So it is in verse 3 that the mystery of the birth of the ayala is brought out in the text. And it's precisely at the moment that God arranges and predestines that they send forth their young and they go off independently, and they don't need your help or anybody else's help to, nor even the help of their fathers and mothers to grow up. We do see this in nature that so many animals actually, the moment they're born, they get up and walk already, unlike humans who are immobile for so long. So now turning in verse 5 from the side of the holy, the ayala, is the the Malchut on the holy side, we now come to the unholy side of the animals as explained by Ravad on his commentary on these chapters and these challenges of God. We come to the pera, the wild ass, and the arod, which is some related species of a wild donkey. Now turning to verse 4, Mishilach pere chofshi umosroth arod mi piteach. Mishilach pere chofshi. Who sent forth the pere, the wild donkey, out free? Umoisrois orod, the straps of the orod donkey. Who released them? Mipiteach, who opened them? Asher samti arovo viso. Umishkenoisov melecho. Asher samti, that I, God, samti, I placed the Arava, the desert valley in the Middle East. We refer to the great valley running down from Asia all the way down to Africa, the Arava, the Rift Valley. Arava Veso, it is the Arava, the dry, wild, outside places, that is his home. Umishkenoisov, the Mishkan, the dwelling place of this creature, is the Melecho, literally salty, also having the connotation of mixed up, and desert. In other words, these animals survive in the salty desert waste without any human intervention. It is all God's providence over them. Continuing in verse 7, Yishak lahamon kiryo, teshuos nogeis lo yishmo. Yishak, he laughs triumphantly, lahamon kiryo, to the Hamon, the surging tumult of the Kiryo, the city. Here is the wild ass, the wild donkey that has rebelled against any subservience to humans and is laughing at the people because he's free out in the wild. Teshuos noiges lo yishmo. The teshuos, the cries of the noges, that is the master that comes to beat and strike the donkey to get him to work. Lo yishmo, he shall not hear them. He does not pay attention to any discipline. Yisur horim mir'ehu ve'achar kol yorok yidrosh. Yisur horim, he goes spying out the mountains, mir'ehu, of his pasture. Ve'achar kol yorok, after all green, yidrosh, shall he search. Well, here we see on the plane of the Pshat, again, how God is showing Eov that man has no control over the forces of nature, but God has providence over all of them. And even the familiar docile donkey is able to rebel and turn into the pere, to which Yishmael in Genesis is actually compared, and it's that comparison of Yishmael that enables us to place the pere on the tree of the Sefirot. The donkey, which is bound up with the mystery of Ishmael, is considered to be on the side of Chesed, but on the side of the Temurot, the side of the exchanges, the side of the unholy forces. And here we are seeing in this verse the expression of how the wild donkey has rebelled against the discipline of the forces of the holy and represents a force of rebelliousness in the creation which may get into the souls of human who get pulled down into this cycle of acting out the attributes of the para. And it is God that has released these forces into the world and left them out in the outside places, which are the symbol of the Timurah, the level of the klipot, the outside forces. And yet by the same token, God is also able to bring back these unholy sparks, to release the holy in them and to bring them back into the side of holiness. This will be alluded to in the word yarok, which is the center column stretching up all the way to Bina, which is called the green line around the universe. And these forces are actually yidrosh, they're searching out to rise up to chokhmah and Bina, which are alluded to in the word harim here, the mountains in verse 8. These unholy forces are trying to rise up to their holy roots and to find their tikkun. So now, moving from verse 8 to verse 9, we come to the Re'em creature, which is another of these mighty creatures of creation that man is not able to control, and yet God has them under his control. And all of this is leading up to the coming chapters 40 and 41, that will be speaking about even mightier creatures. So now on verse 10, Hasikshor reim beselem avoso, im yesadid amokim acharecho. Hasikshor reim. The reim in Psalms is spelled with an aleph, the re'em, and is the Hebrew for the wild ox, the buffalo. Hasikshor re'em, can you bind this wild, rebellious buffalo? Beselem avoisoi, in the furrow of his thick ropes that bind the ox to the plow, to force the ox under the discipline of labor. Do you have the power to do this? So here we've moved up to the side of Gevurah. Earlier we were speaking about the Aryeh, the lion, the Lavi, the side of Chesed. Here when we come to the Re'em, we are on the side of Gevurah, represented by the face of the ox on the Chayot of the Merkavah of Ezekiel. And the ox is notable for its great strength, but the human is not able to bind this paradigm Re'em ox to force him under the discipline of human labor. Im yesadid amokim harecho. Shall this Re'em ox yisaded break up the sadeh, break up the earth, amokim, in the deep places, the valleys where people are wont to plow their fields, achareho, will he go after you, pulling the plow obediently to plow your field? Hasiftach bo kirav kocho v'sa'azov ilov yagi'echo. Hasiftach bo, will you put your trust in him? Kirav kocho, you and I know Rav, how manifold, how great is kocho, his strength. V'sa'azov ilov yagi'echo, will you leave over to him your labor? Are you really going to trust this ox to perform your labors for you in the field? You won't be able to rely upon him because he will not do your bidding. God is here speaking mockingly in these questions to Job about his limited ability to control, if at all, to control these forces of nature. Hasa'amin bo ki yoshiv zarecho V'gornecho ye'esof. Hasa'amin bo. Will you believe in him? Ki yoshiv zarecho. That he will, according to the kri, the hif'il, he will bring back your seed. The kesiv would be, do you believe in him? Ki yoshuv, that he will come back. He won't come back to you. But the more understandable kri, hu yoshiv, he will bring back your seed. Will you trust him to bring back your harvest for you? The gornecho, the goren is the place where the grain is collected after being processed. Gornecho ye'esof, will he gather in your granary? So now we move to the eagle side of the Merkava, and as I mentioned earlier, the Arrivat states in his introduction to Sefer Yetzirah that the Nesher of the vision of Ezekiel of the Merkava, the Nesher is emblematic of all of the different birds that all express and represent different aspects, both the pure species and the impure species of birds, different aspects of the Nesher element, the eagle element of the Merkava. And here now, beginning with the peacock in verse 13, who is called so beautifully in Lashon HaKodesh, the Knaf Renonim, the wing of songs. Knaf Renonim ne'eloso, im evro chasido v'notzo. This verse, grammatically, we see to be a question from the particle im at the beginning of the second half of the verse. Im evro chasido. God is challenging Job to consider one after the other these creatures. Knaf renonim ne'eloso, the knaf renonim, the bird of the singing colors. So our commentators here say that this is the bird that in Hebrew is called the tavas, the peacock. Ne'eloso, a Hebrew root that has a connotation of a verb of rejoicing. She rejoices in displaying her manifold colors. Now, the following words would appear to be referring to other species of birds. Im evro, there is the bird that is called the evro, which is a bird's wing, also another word for the wing of the bird. Chasido, that is the bird that we identify with the stork. The noitzo is a feather, and according to Metzudat David, these different terms are referring to different species of birds, and all of them have this unusual and inexplicable habit, as we see now in verse 14. Ki sa'azov lo'oretz beitzeho v'al ofor techamim, that she abandons to the earth her eggs. Ki sa'azov lo'oretz beitzeho, she abandons to the earth her eggs. V'al ofor techamim, I'll offer upon the earth techamim, she will heat them up. Instead of sitting on her eggs, she lays them and leaves them to get warmed up themselves on the earth. Vatishkach ki regel tezureho v'hayas hasode tedusheho. Vatishkach, she forgot. Ki regel, there is a foot tezureho that will smash up and scramble those eggs. V'hayas hasode, the wild beast of the field, tedusheho, will tread upon that egg, the young of the bird. This amazing lapse of consciousness of the Chasido species and these allied species, that they show no compassion at all for the young, and yet miraculously the young survive. Hikshiach boneho Leloi lo. Lerik yagi'o beli fohad. Hikshiach boneho. The Hebrew word kashuach is that which is very tough, hard. He has, in this very tough way, the subject of hikshiach would be, grammatically, would appear to be a hif'il form that God has made tough. And shiach, the commentators say, has the connotation of hesech hada'at. He has distracted her attention. He's made her tough and immune to compassion, and toughened her and distracted her from boneho, her young. Leloi lo. She has abandoned them to that which is not for her. Lerik yagio, belief fohad. To emptiness is her toil without fear. And why? Verse 17. Ki hisha Eloah chochmo, velo holak lo babino. Ki hisha Eloah. Hisha is a hif'il from a nosho, something that passes out of our consciousness. The gid hanosha in Genesis, the story of Jacob, is the sinew that jumped, and Moses called Manasseh by that name. Joseph called Manasseh because God caused him to forget his toil, and God has caused her, the Hasidah bird, to forget wisdom. Velo cholak lo babino. He has not shared out to her any share of bino. So here we see on this side of the unholy birds rooted in the Nesher eagle of the Merkavah, that God has withdrawn from them Chokhmah and Binah. He has given her only limited consciousness, and this is emblematic of those lower levels of creation where Chokhmah and Binah have been occluded from those levels. And she doesn't know, she doesn't care. Verse 18, Ko'es b'morom tamri tishak lasus u'lerochevo. Ko'es, at that very time when she's given birth to her eggs, she forgets all about them. B'morom tamri, she goes flying up above. Tishak lasus u'lerochevo. She laughs at the horse and its rider. Well, here this is obviously highly elusive, and precisely what the allusions are, we certainly see in Exodus, the story of the crossing of the Red Sea, that it was God that overthrows the horse and its rider. The horse, again, is emblematic of the malchut, the aspect of the kingship over which God rules the world, but God has rule over both the level of the sus, the horse, and the rochvo, the Egyptian riders that were riding this horse. And the Hasidah bird is laughing at this horse, but we've already seen that her laughter is empty because God has withdrawn wisdom and understanding from her. And so we see how the different levels of creation are interacting with one another. And this is the bridge between the section about the previous animals mentioned and now the species that will occupy us until the end of this chapter almost. and that is the horse. Hasitein lasus gevuro, hasalbish tzavoro ramo. Is it you that give to the sus, the horse, gevura, its might? Hasalbish tzavoro ramo. Is it you that clothes the tall, stately neck of the horse with the ramo, literally the thunder, namely the thunderous neigh of the horse, which expresses the snorting, and the neigh of the horse expresses its power. It is not man that achieves this, it's only God. And now we have these beautiful depictions of the power and the fearlessness of the horse. Verse 20, Hasar ishenu ko arbe hod naharo emo. Hasar ishenu, is it you that make Ra'ash, make him quaking about, leaping around, ko arbe, hopping around like a grasshopper, the horse galloping here and there like a grasshopper in its speed, and yet with all the might of the horse. Hod naharo emo. The majesty of its nachro, it's the nachar is the snorting of the nostrils, and that is sheer awe and dread in this mighty animal. In other words, when the horse snorts through its nostrils, it is an awesome sound. Yachburu vo'emek v'yosis b'choach yetzei likras noshek. Again, yachburu vo'emek v'yosis b'choach yetzei likras noshek. Well, the verb yachburu is in the plural, and this would appear to refer to the parashim, the horse riders who are riding the horse into battle. Yachburu vo'emek, they are searching around and galloping around the land to scout it out, vo'emek, in the valley. And now the singular verse goes back to the horse, v'yosis b'choach. The horse is exulting in its might. Yetzei likras noshek. He goes forth face to face against the arms of the enemy. Yishak lefahad v'lo yechos v'lo yoshuv mipnei horev. Yishak lefahad, the horse will laugh at pachad, at fear. V'lo yechos, it shall not be broken with terror. V'lo yoshuv, it shall not return mipnei chorev, on account of the sword. Olov tirne ashbo, lahav chanis v'chidom. Very graphic depiction of the battle now. Olav, upon the horse, tirne ashbo. The tirne is a verb with the root of rino, a root of singing. The ashbo is the sheaf containing the arrows, and the arrows are rattling as the horse is galloping into battle. Lahav hanis, the chidon. The lahav is the flashing flame of the chanis, the spear, and the chidon, the javelin. Barash v'rogez yigame oretz v'lo ya'amin ki kol shofar. Barash, with this great thunderous sound. V'rogez, this anger, this rage. Yigame oretz. Well, two possible pshats here on this word yigame from the Hebrew gumo, which is when the horse gallops, it leaves deep marks in the land. Yigame also from the expression of hagme'eni in Exodus chapter 24, verse 17, Eliezer asks Rebekah to give water to him and his camels. Yagama, here the horse is swallowing up drinking up the earth, and it's galloping forward. Lo yamin kikol shofar. He does not believe that it's the sound of the shofar trumpet. Says Rashi, because of the great joy of the horse at the opportunity to gallop here madly against the enemy, the horse is not at all concerned at that the trumpet is one of war, because the horse is only too joyous. He desires to go into horse. B'dei shofar yomar he'och u'merachok yoriach milchamo ra mesorim usru'o. B'dei shofar, with an abundance, day, very much of the shofar blast, the trumpet sounding all around. Yomar he'och. This is an expression of simcha, he'och, of joy. We find it also in Psalms 35, verse 25, in the same expression, the expression of exaltation of enemies rejoicing in their ability to take vengeance. So the more trumpeting, the merrier. From afar, he catches the scent of war that gets him all on edge and full of desire. Ra'am sorim, the thundering of the sarim, the thundering of the princes. Usru'o, the blast of the trumpet. So now, coming back to the nesher element of the Merkava, of the divine chariot, Hamipinosecho ya'avir neitz, yifros knofov l'seimon. Hamipinosecho, the interrogative again, is it from your bino understanding, ya'avir nets. The nets is the hawk, and ya'avir would be a verb from the same root as the expression ever or evro, the wing. Is it through your understanding that the net hawk will take flight? Yifros knofov, he will extend out its wings, the Simon, to the south. Well, here Rashi on verse 26 says that, quoting the Talmud tractate Gittin, Daf Lamed Aleph Amud Bes 31a, he says, Malach hu doime d'dmus neitz. This is an angel that stands in the form of the hawk bird. So here we do see Rashi alluding to the place of these various creatures in the Merkava. This is an allusion to an angel that takes the form of a net hawk. And this angel is holding back the harshness of the south wind by spreading out its wings so that the south wind should not destroy the whole world. Verse 27, Im alpicho yagbia nosher v'chiorim kino. Im alpicho, or would it be by your mouth, Yagbia nosher, that the nesher eagle rises high up, v'chi yorim kino, and that he lifts up his nest. The eagle is credited with carrying its little chicks on its backs. It flies so high that it has no fear of anybody coming at it from above. Its fear is from arrows and missiles sent from below, so it puts its chicks on its back. So hamibinosach, on its wings, as it says in the verse, I brought you on eagle's wings, is out of your human understanding that the alpio yagbia nesher, that the eagle rises up high, v'chiorim kino, he lifts up his nest on its wings. But here on this verse, Rashi tells us that this nesher, this eagle, is actually defending the high priest when the high priest enters the Holy of Holies on the Day of Atonement, and the nesher lifts up and holds back all of the destructive angels from harming the high priest in the sanctuary. Verse 28, Sela yishkon v'yislonon al shen sela umetsudo. Sela yishkon, the nesher bird, yishkon, he dwells on the sela, the rock. V'yislonon al shen sela, he is sleeping for the night on the sharp tooth of the rocky crag, umetsuda, on the high point of the tower, with no fear up there in the driving winds. The nesher is up there. Mishom chofar ochel lemerochok einov yabitu. Mishom chofar ochel. From there he searches out food with the amazingly sharp vision of the eagle, another of the mysteries of God's providence, and alluding here to the eagle aspect of the Merkava, the divine chariot of providence that sees from afar and governs men's affairs from afar. Lemerochok einov yabitu, from afar his eyes perceive. Ve'efroichov ya'al'u dom u'va'ashir chalolim shomhu. Ve'efroichov, the efrochim, the chicks of the eagle, ya'al'u dom, a very expressive Hebrew verb, as Rashi tells us in his comment on this verse, verse 30. The young of the eagle are swallowing the blood of the prey, and this, says Rashi, is the way it is with one that swallows blood and water in great quantities, be it blood, be it water. It appears as if the person that swallows abundance of water is saying ow, 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 as he swallows. Og, 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 that is how it sounds. And likewise, we find our sages referring to the way that the Sota woman was required to drink the bitter waters. They used a similar verb in the Talmud, Sota, Daf Chof Amud Aleph, Ma'al Arin Sota. They make her drink up. The Resh and the Lamed, Ma'al Al and Ar are both expressions of swallowing. So here we see how the beasts and the birds of the Merkava are swallowing up the earth in their providence, and on the literal plane, wherever the chalalim, the cadavers are, where there's an opportunity to scavenge, there are the young of the eagle. But Rashi refers to a midrash that I've already mentioned. He says on verse 28, when the verse says that the eagle dwells on the rocky crag, this, says Rashi, alludes actually to Aaron, who is apparently being compared here to the eagle. Aaron, who on account of the Ketoret, incense sacrifice that he offers when he enters the Holy of Holies, and he places the censer on the Even Shesiyah foundation stone, he has no fear. And Rashi on verse 39 tells us that the high priest prays there for all of the needs of Israel for the whole year. And despite all of this glory that the high priest has, Aaron, having seen all this glory, he comes out, and on the day of the inauguration of the sanctuary, he sees the death of his two chicks, his two children, Nadav and Avihu, who died in order to fulfill the sanctification of God's name, that his fear would fall upon all of the others. So here we see how highly elusive all of this is on many different levels, and with that, we conclude the present parasha in the Hebrew text, and as we shall see, the text now going from chapter 40 enters into a new parasha with God addressing Job, and Job very briefly replying. So with that, my dear friends, we leave here our Mikra for today, another absolutely riveting chapter of Job, and we shall come back very shortly after a brief interval with our study of Mishnah Shabbat, moving now into chapter 22. Shalom, my dear friends. Shalom again. And now we continue with our studies in the Holy Mishnah in Masachet Shabbat. And without further ado, let's go straight into that. Shalom. Today, the 20th of Sivan of the year 5777, corresponding to the 14th of June of the year 2017. We now come to the 22nd chapter of Masachet Shabbat, Mishnah Shabbat, and we will be dealing in this chapter with several issues relating to squeezing of liquids out of solids, as well as some related issues which connects with what we had studied in the previous chapter about the use of a sponge on the Shabbat to absorb water. And we saw that if a sponge did not have a handle, one cannot even use it to mop up something. A sponge in itself is not intrinsically muktzeh, but we do not encourage the use of a sponge where the person would come to squeeze the liquid out of it for the reason that this is a violation of the prohibition against the labor of dash, of the separation of one thing from another. Since the liquid was absorbed in the sponge, when it is squeezed out, then it is separated from the sponge, and this relates to issues about squeezing of fruit juices or juice that exudes from fruits, as we shall see in our chapter. So we begin with something that takes our minds back to the beginning of chapter 16, called Kisvei HaKodesh, all the holy writings, which spoke about what one can rescue from a fire on Shabbat. And our Mishnah now speaks about a related issue to that. What could you do if you had a barrel that had got broken or cracked on the Shabbat, be it a barrel of wine or oil or some other precious liquid that you want to save? And how much can you save on the Shabbat, and how may you save it? Chovis shenishbaro, if there was a barrel that got broken, matzilin emeno mezoin sholosh seudos, they may save from it food for 3 meals of the Shabbat. V'oimer la'achirim, the person may tell others, bo v'hatzilu lochem, you come and save for yourselves. He knows and they know that it is his liquid, but he's saying, well, you can take it for yourselves if you wish. I know you will probably want to return it to me after the Shabbat. We cannot allow the person to collect more than 3 meals, because in the person's consternation, they might start mopping up the liquid. And our Mishnah says, uvilvad shelo yispog, you may collect the liquid on condition that you do not try to mop it up with a sfog, with some kind of sponge-like a material that's going to absorb the liquid, because that would lead the person to violate the prohibition against schita, the squeezing out of liquid. And that leads us to a number of other issues with the squeezing of liquids and juices. Ein soichatin es apeirois loitzi mehen mashkin. We do not squeeze out fruits to extract from them their juices, liquids. Ve'im yatzu me'atzmon asurin, and if the juices came out by themselves, if the pieces of fruit were lying in a dish and the juice was exuding by itself, asurin, those liquids on the Shabbat are forbidden. The fear is that if we permit the person to use on that Shabbat juices that float out by themselves, then he may come to squeeze the fruits in question. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Imla ochelin, Rabbi Judah says, if the fruits had been gathered in and prepared for consumption as food, solid, hayotze mehen muter, the liquid that exudes from the fruit would be permitted. Ve'im lemashkin, however, if the fruits have been collected there for juices, hayotze mehen also, that which comes out from the fruits will be forbidden. Well, now, let us, to understand the background of this Mishnah, take note that the two principal fruits of the land of Israel that were used for their juices were the grapes and the olives. The grapes for the grape, olives for their oil. And everybody in this discussion agrees that grapes and olives, even if they've been collected in for food, it'll be forbidden to, if juices did exude from them on the Shabbat, on that Shabbat, those juices could not be consumed. After the Shabbat, they may be, but even Rabbi Yehuda would agree that even if the grapes and olives were gathered for food, the juices on the Shabbat were forbidden. The sages, for their part, who in the earlier part of the Mishnah say that apparently that any juices that come out, even by themselves, will be forbidden, they would agree, according to the Talmud, with Rabbi Yehuda that in the case of fruits other than grapes and olives, that would be if the fruits have been gathered in for food, since the person's intention was not to bring them in for their juices, they could take the juices that flowed out. The whole machloket, the whole division of opinion between Rabbi Yehuda and the other sages relates to fruits other than olives and grapes, fruits that are often but not always used for their juices. Examples in our time would be oranges and lemons and apples. So as a rule of the halacha, only in the case of fruits which are not used specifically for their juices, but which are gathered in for food, if juice did exude on the Shabbat, it may be used on that Shabbat. But those fruits that are used for their juices, one certainly may not squeeze them. And if the fruits were collected for their juice, one may not use the juice that flows out from them on the Shabbat. With that, we come on to another related issue, and that is of the honey flowing out of a honeycomb. Chalois devash, literally the loaves of honey, the combs of the honey. Sheriskon me'erev Shabbos. If the person had crushed the honeycomb from before Shabbat, v'yotzu me'atzmon, and the honey flowed out by itself, asurin, that honey will be forbidden to use on the Shabbat. Because we are using the honeycombs for their honey, which is going to flow out of the wax comb, therefore we are fearful, according to the Tanakama, that the person, if we allow him even to take the honey that flowed out by itself, that he will come to infringe the prohibition against squeezing. Rabbi Eliezer does not concern himself with this. Rabbi Eliezer Matir, he permits the honey to be used on the Shabbat if the comb was crushed from before the Shabbat. He would certainly forbid the crushing of the comb for its honey on the Shabbat. This would relate in practice particularly to those people who on the Yom Tov of Rosh Hashanah would like to have a honey comb on the table. It's preferable not to do this, to make sure that the honey has been squeezed out of the wax before the Yom Tov, since the law here of squeezing on Yom Tov would be similar to that of the law on the Shabbat. The halacha is not like Rabbi Eliezer, the halacha is like the sages in this Mishnah. Coming now to the second Mishnah, we go into a related subject of the preparation of foods on Shabbat, but here we're talking about rabbinical decrees on account of the prohibitions of cooking on the Shabbat. So here we come to a general principle. Kol shebo b'chamin me'erev Shabbos, shoydin oisoi b'chamin b'Shabbos. Anything that had come into hot water from before Shabbat, you may place it in hot liquids on Shabbat. An example would be a portion of chicken that had been cooked before the Shabbat, if it had been boiled in water, and also if it was already cooked already by roasting. In either way, since it's already cooked, there is no prohibition about putting it into hot liquids on Shabbat. You could take the cold piece of chicken, the portion of chicken from before the Shabbat, and put it into a plate of hot chicken soup if you wished, because once it has already been cooked, there is no fear that it's going to be cooked once again in the hot liquid. The converse, kol sheloi bo b'chamin me'erev Shabbat. Any food that had not been cooked, it had not been exposed to hot liquids from before the Shabbat. Medichin oisei b'chamin b'Shabbos. You could rinse it over with hot water on the Shabbat. Merely rinsing it in a hot gravy, that would not be sufficient to cook uncooked food. So it would be permitted somebody who had a portion of chicken that if they chose to eat raw or semi-cooked chicken, they would be allowed to pour the hot gravy or the hot soup over it, because that is also not considered to be cooking the uncooked portion of food. And the same would apply to it would be permitted to pour hot soup over a slice of bread from before the Shabbat, and but that applies only to a food that is not going to be rendered edible through the pouring of hot liquid over it. So here the Mishnah goes on to an exception, a number of exceptions. The above rule of pouring hot liquid over a food that had not been cooked from before the Shabbat, that does not apply in the following cases. Chutz min hamoliach ayoshon, with the exception of the moliach, the salted fish or the salted meat, yoshon, the old salted meat. In times before freezers and refrigerators, the only way to preserve meat and fish was to salt them heavily, and that way they could keep over long periods of time. They were not cooked before being salted. They were salted, and the salt preserved them. Dogim meluchim, likewise salted fish, dogim meluchim ketanim, the small salted fish. V'kulias ha'isponen, the kulias ha'isponen, I don't know whether the isponen relates to our name Spain and whether this is some kind of sardine. It is some kind of species of fish that has a very fine skin. And the reason why it's prohibited to pour hot water over these salted meat or fish, or these salt fish, small salt fish, or the kulia species, is because hadochoson zoi gemar malachton. Hadochoson, the rinsing of these species, that will be the completion of their malacha, the completion of the labor that renders them fit to eat, and therefore it will be forbidden to rinse them in hot water on the Shabbat. But as the Mishnah previously stated, food that was cooked from before the Shabbat, it would be permitted to put that food into a hot plate of soup, to pour hot gravy over it. So with that, my dear friends, we conclude our studies for today, and with the help of God, we will be back here tomorrow together with you. Now I'd like to wish you shalom and my blessings from the holy city of Jerusalem. Yom Tov, a good and a blessed day, and look forward to studying with you again. Shalom from Jerusalem.
al yidai du vi Mashiach tzedek